Today, we talk about
Yo, Kyle. Here to help you, Kyle. All right, is this too comfy? What's a better angle here? Is this gonna work? I don't know. All right, let's bust out some of these Q&A vids. It's been too long, man. Finally got out of work at a decent time. You know what it is. We got the ish organized. Okay, so free time in medical school. Contrary to popular belief, you get plenty of free time, my guy. And that's kind of, it's kind of tricky. Tricky. No, it's kind of tricky because it's really how much free time do you want to create for yourself, and how structured you want to be, and how efficient you want to be studying, and all those kinds of factors. I would say your first 2 years of medical school should be your most free time. And again, a lot of this is going to have to do with the structure of your medical school and medical schooling. For example, for me, I had purely online courses with the occasional required attendance class in medical school. So I could do everything from home. And so you have access to the lectures, the lecture slides, and I could even double speed lectures. And lucky for me, I was able to tolerate that kind of speed to the point where I was taking a 6-week theme, let's say a cardiology theme or a GI theme or a pulmonary theme. And, they give you like 4 to 6 weeks per theme, where every day there's, 3 to 4 hours of lecture. And then once the 6 weeks is up, you get the exam, then you move on to the next theme. My dumbass would wait for like the 2-3 days before the exam to like just bum rush the entire syllabus, which I would not advise you do, because I wouldn't do all the tests. Somehow was able to pass them, and somehow able to make it out and be doing pretty good for myself now. But I feel like that's an unrelated topic as far as like the value of how much they teach you and what's high yield in medical school, especially the in-house lecture programs and what you gonna do. Point is, I would not advise doing that. But the fact that I did that obviously left me with literally weeks at a time of free time to do whatever I wanted, which mostly involved watching movies and YouTube and day. But I'm playing video games with my friends, playing basketball. But I would not advise that. I think a good habit is to put in, think about it, man. You got three hours of lecture a day, right? 3-4 hours. Take that time and double it. So we're talking put in 3 hours in the lecture if you actually go, and then put another 3 hours maybe listening to the lecture again at double speed or 1.5 speed, or at home taking a double speed tour of the material that right then and there. Have the discipline to do that for let's say you have 3-4 hours of content that day that you need to get through. At double speed, you could get through 2 cycles of it in half the time, so an hour and a half to 2 hours, right? Obviously, not everyone can listen to lectures at that speed or even comprehend at that speed. But if you feel like you confidently can, that's an easy way to cut out time, especially with those lectures that are like super slow and talk pretty slowly and consistently repeat things, so that if you were to listen at double speed, you could understand it. You know what I mean? Anyway, so that is an option, and then that way you get through literally the day's work, so to speak, in 4, 5, 6 hours max, and then the rest of the day is yours, man. You can do whatever you want. Technically speaking, you want to take on a second job to kind of like pay for the bills while you're getting through medical school. You want to use that time to work on other hobbies. You want to use that time to hang out with other friends or family or whatever. That time is yours, man, especially because if you don't have to go to lecture, then you can sleep in. So if you want to do something late at night, you can. Now it gets a little tougher if you have actual required classes, but again, you can adjust to that, especially if you're coming off of college where you're used to going to class, or even if you're not used to going to class. Even then, putting in the hours that you have to put in to get to medical school, you should hopefully have some kind of discipline to be able to stick to this, right? So almost like treat it like you have a full-time job, except your full-time job is literally just to sit there and learn, right? And then we could talk about efficiency of learning. That may take some practice, especially if you have a certain style of learning and then you get to medical school and then now you have to like kind of adapt because you're not really used to it. That definitely happened with me, because you realize very quickly people are not going to spoon feed you information, and the lectures and the way they're taught sometimes suboptimal to your learning style. So then you got to kind of navigate that, and it may take you 2-3 themes to kind of find a rhythm of like, okay, no, now I know I got to do things this way and not that way. All right, I know not to pay attention to this because these aren't the kinds of things that they teach. For example, a quick and dirty one I can give you an example of is actually a few things. One, do not spend too much time learning mnemonics. Like there are some super key ones and like super classic ones that you hear every medical student talk about. Those maybe, but for the most part, do not learn mnemonics, because you're going to learn mnemonics and then you're going to learn what the mnemonics are for. And now you have to learn two things. You have to learn what the mnemonic is and then what each thing in the mnemonic is, if that makes sense. So I think it's easier if you treat each thing you're learning as like, okay, how do I explain this sentence or this topic or this bit of information that I'm learning in this chapter, whatever theme? How do I translate this to second grade language? Like, how can I communicate this to like, a middle schooler? And then if you do that, you'll become more efficient at studying, because you'll have to spend less time studying, because you'll have less to remember, because you hadn't made sense the first time. And once something makes sense, this is how I learn. Like, as soon as it makes common sense to me, then if I ever see it referenced on a test, I'll be, okay, well, this chance, answer choice A doesn't make any sense. Answer choice E kind of makes sense. Choice C makes more sense. You know what I mean? Now, that's one. The second thing is comparison charts. So there's a lot of like comparison charts in medical school. Like, you have Crohn's disease has these features, ulcerative colitis has these features. Or like this bacteria has these features and this bacteria has these features. It's like, dude, don't sit there and memorize each column of each side. Look at them and just like take yourself out of like the bop, 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 bop mode of it, and just look at it like, okay, here's the big picture. I got to learn the difference between these two, right? So instead of learning the key features of each, they may have a lot of overlapping features. So in a test type of situation, they're obviously not going to ask you related features. They're going to ask you what makes the difference between these two. So that if they're trying to have you pick one over the other, they want to know that you understand the differences between them, not the similarities. So if you were to look at a table like that, just focus on what's different about the two entities that are being compared, not memorize everything across both of them. Now you're just giving yourself more work to do, which is going to take you longer to study, which is going to consume more of your free time. Now, we could go on and on and on about this, but here's another factor. You are going to get to your third year medical school, and now all of a sudden, you ain't got as much free time. This is where it gets really tough. And whoever said medical school gets easier and easier every year, I'm going to punch them in the gang face. You know what I mean? That is total horse poo-poo, okay? Every year to me got harder. Like, that's just what it was. Except for the fourth year. The last year was chill as F. But that third year was probably the absolute worst, because think about it. You are now doing rotations. Typically, the structures that now you're doing clinical rotations, which is somewhat exciting and scary and nerve-wracking. It's like, ooh, I get to see actual patients now. But at some level, it's also kind of annoying, because you're waking up mad early, more early than you're probably used to. Like, our typical medical school lectures didn't start till 9. Any day that started at 8 was just like, ugh. And on top of all that, you don't even have to go. But all of a sudden with clinicals, you've got to go. And you're not there to learn lecture material that they're going to be testing on. You're actually out there just experiencing the hospital. A lot of that not being high yield, let's be honest. And again, it's not being high yield for exams, which is obviously what you're focused on, because that's what applications are focused on. That's just the system. But really, it's even though it's not high yield day to day, each day is important just to expose you to the medical world and just give you additional exposure to the real world of healthcare and medicine. Like, you need to see that to be able to start making brain connections of what you read in the textbooks the past 2 years and what's actually going on in the real world, what's relevant, what's not. And that's going to honestly inform your test taking, but again, just not in a high yield format. So what ends up happening is you got to find a way to be more efficient with your time in between. So I advise you have a little pocketbook of either like, any of those like classic series that you hear about through Amazon, like How to Crush the Boards, or GI secrets, or any of those like basic mini book series for each theme that you're on or each rotation that you're on. And that way, in between patients or downtime that classically happens in certain rotations, you bust out that book, you get through a couple pages. Next thing you know, by the end of the 4-week, 6-week, 8-week rotation, you've cleared that book. And then when you get home at night, you're exhausted, you're tired, you've been up all day, especially if you're on your surgery rotation where you're doing these early mornings. And then you're standing all day and doing nothing. And then, well, not always nothing, but, idiot-wordy. Then you get home, and then now you got to actually put in some study time, because that's not what you were doing, during the day. You were doing rotation-ish. So it's working different parts of your brain and different sets of learning. But you're just going to have to find a way to prioritize that. So you're not going to have as much free time your third year, that's for sure. And you'll just be so exhausted, you probably won't even be doing much, to be honest with you. And then the fourth year, if you haven't figured it out by the fourth year, then I don't know what to tell you. But you will definitely have a ton of free time. Your fourth year, trust me on that. Maybe not so much before matching, or at least, the application process and the interview process and all that. But after all that, and after the rank lists are due and all that stuff, ideally you should be in chill mode to some extent. I mean, things should kind of start to get into auto cruise or cruise control. You should have some easier rotations to kind of end the year, like film and medicine, or some kind of wacky elective that is pretty chill, whatever. Everyone always knows what the chill rotations are. You just got to ask your classmates. But yeah, man, it's really not as bad as you think, with the exception of that third year. That third year is rough, man. But even then, I found myself doing plenty during that third year. I remember going to dinners. I remember playing basketball. Actually, I probably played the most basketball in my third year. But that was, again, by choice. That was, this was at the sacrifice of my grades, which I would not advise. It's not ideal. It's just the path I took. And, if I were to do it all again, I would do things a lot differently. Just being more efficient with my time, dedicated little bits of studying each day are going to do wonders for you. Trust me. Even if you were to just read 2 pages a day of material that you're supposed to throughout every day of medical school, you will be a billion steps ahead of where I was. And that's, it's so much easier said than done, but honestly, you just got to have that kind of discipline to tell yourself, hey, I'm going to study today. I'm not going to put it off. Is there anything else to this topic? Free time in medical school. Free time in medical school. Hey, I mean, you get your breaks, right? You get your Christmases, your Thanksgivings. I can't remember if there was a spring break or not for medical school. I honestly don't remember. Weekends should be fairly chill. I mean, you can structure your weekends the way you want. A lot of people, balls to the walls, just sit there and study on their weekends. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, you can reach a happy balance. My annoyance, honestly, was anytime they would have Monday exams. So typically the exams were either Mondays or Fridays. I'm just like, dude, I'm so frustrated with these Monday exams, because first of all, you lose that weekend. That weekend, you better be studying, because everyone else is going to be studying. Trust me. And if you had just made it and then the worst part is, then not only do you not have that weekend to yourself, you're like so consumed with either studying or being nervous about the test coming up. After all that, after that Monday, you go right back to the next theme on Tuesday. There's like no break, no celebration period, no time to give yourself a breather, nothing. Whereas if you have a Friday exam, you take the exam, yeah, maybe you get 2 less days to study, but so did everyone else, and you already had frickin' 6 weeks. Come on, son. And then at least after the exam, woo, you get this whole weekend to yourself just to chill, maybe take a girls trip, do a dude's trip somewhere, go out of town, go to the local city. I was in upstate New York, so we would go down to the city sometimes for the weekend. That was a great time. Sometimes someone would throw a party, someone would throw a fishing trip, or whatever. You go play some basketball, hang out with your pets. I don't freaking know, son. Come on. But then, you get that couple days to just kind of de-stress, and then you go back to the next theme on Monday. So if I remember correctly, actually, they would actually have us vote on what day we want the test, Monday or Friday. And I was so furious when Mondays would win out. I'm just like, what? What is going on here? What is wrong with you people? But hey, idia or what idia. So, hey, let me know if you have questions further on this. We could always make a part 2. But with that said, we'll see you soon. Bye. Good luck. Peace.